Hello everyone. So, from the last talk, my talk is, occasionally I present work at conferences on stuff on bifacial photovoltaics, and inevitably as soon as you bring the word up, people glaze over, I start rolling, it's not really well looked upon or taken too seriously. So, I thought we could do it more and try and convince myself that I wasn't crazy for pursuing some of this. The answer will be a bit mixed. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. The first one basically being sort of a flagship case on a white roof, and the second one a big problem in bifacial right now, and that is actually comparing different bifacial cells to each other. All right? You guys should all be familiar with this. Bifacial PV, monofacial, obviously you got a reflector on the rear. Bifacial, you got bifacial illumination from the back. And I'm not talking about this situation. You obviously don't get any light with that. Occasionally, people ask questions. So no, that's not the bifacial use case. You won't get anything with that. The better examples are that show up a lot. You have grassy fields, you have illumination of the rear from reflection off the grass. Sometimes you have them stand vertically. The most sort of flagship case when you have some white paint behind it and you get a very nice reflection off the rear, so that being in the elevator. Right? Some of the advantages for bifacial, or at least claimed by various companies that do this, you get obviously enhancements in efficiency because now you have illumination from the front and the rear. So typically around 20% is reported when we're dealing with white paint on the rear. Sometimes 25 varies quite a bit. But another one is the fact that it gets spread out better throughout the day. Right? So it's close to, it's very, in some cases it's very similar at around noon, but then it stretches further as you get to the higher and lower hours of the day as it might be. Right? Now, so take a closer look at this actual case. So this is the case that gets sort of tested again and again in bifacial. It's cells spread out nicely on a beautiful white roof, and it's pretty consistent to see 20% improvements. So this is the case from recent conference where they show 20% obvious improvement for bifacial over monofacial, although they commit the sin of using their own cell for the bifacial and someone else's cell for the monofacial. So they're not actually comparing technologies, which happens a lot. However, then you sometimes get results like this, which is, again, on the roof, but you only see like 3% improvements. And it's very difficult to see why that might be the case, because no one keeps us at standard. One of the questions for the case on white roofs, a big problem, is the fact that, as you'll notice, if you want reflections onto the rear, you actually need spacing between the different modules. If they're all right next to each other, like this example, you're going to get nothing on that. So how much do you actually require to get some sort of benefit out of it? Now, if you're just doing monofacial modules, you're looking at, say, you have to have some spacing anyway, let's say about 1 meter between them, if you work out the numbers, from the shading just from having them on an appropriate angle to the sunlight. The unit calculation for the bifacial modules, it varies significantly depending on the amount of area you take into account. So if you say this red line here, this is for at 10 meter by 10 meter area, then you start seeing improvements. This would be around 20% improvement bifacial there. So it's a significant amount of area to actually get what they're claiming about. The problem is that every time they're doing these tests where they're claiming their 20% efficiency improvements, they're taking like one module and putting it on like an entire roof and doing the tests. So it's something to be cognizant of. Some other arrangements for bifacials that I didn't really want to get into because there could be some BIPV stuff is BIPV, right? So these situations are probably more amenable than the white roof scenario. White roof scenario, if you've got 20% improvement and you've got to space them out by much more, that's not really doing anything for you. But when you're building them in anyway, when you're using them vertically to take up less space and replacing another material, it can potentially be much more beneficial And the same, I think, was discussed in the previous talk about the considerations of going, say, semi-transparent when you're putting into windows. There's more than just the efficiency number you have to consider. One of the big problems with bifacial PV, if you go to a conference, is the fact that there is no set standard on how to measure them. Right? So when you have monofacial cells, you have your nice little IEC and ASTM standards for solar simulating measurements or spectral response measurements. But they only deal with front illumination. They pretty much assume you have a rear reflector. So every time you get bifacial measurements, they're pretty much done in the environment. And that makes sense because you depend so much on the environment. But it makes it very difficult to compare different technologies. They're almost never directly compared to each other. I don't know what happened. So this can be very frustrating. It brings up a lot of questions. But there have been things proposed that need to be looked into. Normally people are just reporting both at normal test conditions, but it leaves some stuff out. They usually use a black chalk. Another case is just multiple illumination. That's been proposed, at least in thesis written, which is an interesting way to approach it. It's probably a lot more than people want to spend to get new technology and just to measure bifacial cells, which would be niche for them. But something else been proposed where you can literally do that monofacial measurement, and all you have to do is an adjustment to your open circuit voltage based on the increased current, and take into account the increased series resistance again from the proportion to current squared. So I will actually just finish up there and open up to questions. Short enough, but I don't think it needs a summary. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your questions. Okay, even though... Oh, Darren, please.
Hi, interesting talk. Yes, there are no standards for bifacial panels. What are you expecting for efficiency increase, let's say, for an average LEO, so not grass, not snow, so 0.5, let's say gravel or white? Those are the newer standard bifacial.
Yeah, so for...
and that would be, let's say, at the angle the same as the latitude, and you're on June 21st.
I think that was pretty much the best case scenario. That would be typical recording scenarios of 25% improvement is what is important. For that same sort of idea, that's almost optimal, right? Well, not compared to, you know what I mean, not compared to 0.85.
Okay, so 20 to 25% efficiency. So, and for the rest of, and let's say for the equinox.
The equinox, I'm not sure.
Oh, you're working on this one. Okay.
Yep, it's going to be the first one.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.